let's get on this really new, let's say, buzzword type topic today. So let me start with the obvious one, which is for those who I haven't had the pleasure of getting to know yet in one way or another, my name is Mick Griffin. I'm head of growth here at TRAFFIT, and I've joined TRAFFIT 2 years ago, which is actually what places me today in quite a unique situation of why I really wanted to talk about this topic. So what is candidate nurturing and why should we care? Now, that's the key part of element here. I don't just want to talk about the practicality of it. I'm going to talk a little bit today about also the problem that has actually caused candidate nurturing to become a new topic for us here. And I wanted to find an analogy that would really explain this best from my point of view as a recruiter in this perspective, which is, I don't know if any of you know this box of chocolates, which is called Celebrations. I have to admit, it's my kryptonite. It's like my biggest sin. I love these. I love these chocolates. And I was using this today as an analogy because I don't know if any of you can relate to this, but when I get this kind of box of chocolates for a birthday or Christmas or something like that, I certainly have a favorite. And my favorite, I think, here is like the Galaxy. Galaxy is my best. And when I open it, I'm going to rip into those Galaxy ones as good as I can. But I don't know about anyone else, but I also have a least favorite, right? So I'm really not bothered about like Bounty and Milky Way. But if I was going to buy a box of Celebrations only for the Galaxies and throw everything else away, it would be a completely ineffective experience, right? We could just go out and buy that chocolate bar directly. But I saw some similarities here between how we are forced sometimes to make recruitment decisions, that we go out there and we open a recruitment job and we get 10, 20, 30, 40 candidates and we want to hire one, and the rest they get discarded in the best possible way we can, but we throw them away and it becomes a very ineffective scenario. But I came back to my analogy of the chocolates, which is, I don't know about you, but I'll have eaten all the Galaxies, the Maltesers. I love them. I'm like, wow, great. I'm super not interested in Milky Ways, like not bothered. And then it gets to about 3 or 4 days later, and I'm like, okay, I really want some chocolate. I'm willing to change my expectations, and I will eat the Milky Way. Because it's like, I'm using this as a very outside analogy to what I'm going to talk about today, which is basically that our needs, our expectations, our cravings, our demands, they change. And even though I wouldn't eat a Milky Way at all when I open this box of chocolates day one, I can guarantee you there'll be no Milky Ways left by the end of the week. That's a different problem for me, but it's my analogy. So let's talk about the real problems that businesses are facing right now, which is causing candidate nurturing to become a hot topic. The first one is recruitment is getting more expensive. Now, you've probably all understood or felt this in one way or another, but in recent research I was making with Adrian, TRAFFIT CEO, was that cost per candidate increased 43% in 2021 to $28 per candidate on average worldwide. Now, of course, we will probably have some people in this in our webinar today. I saw from the registrations from Germany, from the UK, from Poland. So you obviously all have a different average, but what's probably the consistency here is that average is increasing dramatically wherever you are. Price of job boards is going up. Even though we are now moving to sourcing, recruiting a source full time and using them is going up. The cost of using agencies is going up. So we're all feeling this change in price because of the demand for talent. Recruiting is getting more challenging. In Poland alone, there are now 20,000 open roles based around the tech sector and tech and digital jobs. So marketers, sales, customer success, developers, administration, finance, HR. We are looking at now this crowded space of 20,000 open roles, at least just in the technology sector, which is where we try to specialize. And this is a very unique thing that I've learned, that you can have 4 companies who are completely not in your sector. So let's say for TRAFFIT is an ATS. I can have a friend who has a company in social media, in email marketing, even in production, and we don't compete in any way on our kind of business model, which is great. But if we all want to hire a head of marketing, we instantly become competitors. So it's also a really challenging space with lots of competition wherever we look. So it's causing us to be more, let's say, optimized, more diverse in the way that we approach these recruitment processes. And candidate nurturing is definitely going to become one of those things. And finally, I put this one in there because it's just a statistic that always grabs my eye, that top candidates are in the market. So they are, from the day that they decide that they are looking for a new role and they either accept a headhunting proposal or something, within 10 days, highly qualified candidates have received an offer. So that means that when you look at your processes and your recruitment process, and if you are hiring, not counting into consideration like notice period, if your decision-making process is taking 30 days, 40 days, 60 days, as we know it can in some companies, you've got a real strong chance of missing out on quality talent who will have already accepted an offer while they're still in your recruitment process. And what I want to say is that these are three recruitment processes, these are three problems in recruitment that are kind of fresh. And I put that this is a new problem for recruiting, but what is great news for everybody is it's probably a problem that you are already solving in your company in a different place, in a different department. And I'm always going to use in sales and marketing, they have already been dealing with competitive places. They've been competing with cost of leads, cost of acquiring new leads. So what's great is that we're going to talk a little bit today about the processes that we've already learned from sales and marketing departments and how we can apply them to recruiting and how to use them to nurture our candidates. So that's the problem. And I definitely want to hear from you at the end of the webinar if you think those problems apply to you or not. But let's talk a little bit about the solution. So we know that the solution, and this is obvious for everyone that joined today, the solution is the talent pool. Yeah. So this pool of candidates that we've rejected in the past, and we've still got them in our database with their lovely GDPR consents, of course, but we've got them. And this talent pool is the solution to our problem in many, many ways. And this is a statement that we make at TRAFFIT, which is, I truly believe that a company's talent pool of rejected candidates will become its most profitable recruiting asset. And what we're comparing here now is the cost of constantly generating new candidates for open roles and the increasing cost of new candidates for open roles versus accessing candidates that you've already collected and you've already spent the money obtaining. And you're going to see in the near future for all the companies, I truly believe that we are going to start making the direct comparison between those two channels and how effective the talent pool is. So I'm going to tell you what happens in sales and marketing, and I think that recruitment can go the same way. So let's talk about what you can do after this webinar, but that probably will still cause some outcomes that you were not expecting. So here is what I expect to happen. We have a talent pool. So a candidate applies for a job. They get rejected because they have lack of experience. And we don't talk to that candidate for 18 months, but they're still in our talent pool. So after today's webinar, we go, great, let's go back to those candidates and let's offer them the jobs that are currently available and see if they're interested. What will happen is very, very straightforward. You will find a candidate in your talent pool that now has the relevant experience that you require because they spent 18 months in a different company. But when you actually reach out to them and you source them or you go to try to hire them, they're still going to reject your offer. And there's a very simple reason for that, because there was a gap between being rejected and the time that you are now thinking, oh, wow, we could really use you now. And that's because they have negative to zero brand experience with you. So over that time period, whether or not it's 3 months, 6 months, 18 months, if we haven't nurtured the relationship, it's not going to change anything for the candidate, because they either remember that you rejected them and then never talk to them again, so they have a negative experience with your brand. Or if they don't remember you, it's equally as bad because you are still starting from the beginning. So that headhunting process isn't going to give you any kind of competitive advantage. And this is how it works from what I believe from the company perspective, which is you buy a job ad, $250. You get your 20 candidates, you hire one, you reject 19, which is great. This happens and it's totally natural. We can only hire usually one person at a time. We have our 18-month gap, and then we think, okay, job boards are quite expensive. Let's go into our talent pool and try to hire a candidate from our existing talent pool. But because we haven't nurtured those candidates, eventually that doesn't work, and we have to go back and we have to buy a job ad again, start with new candidates, or we use a job agency, for example. And we get in this vicious circle. So it's great to start going back and thinking about your talent pool, but without the nurture part of this topic, you're not going to have kind of, let's say, huge results. So I've talked a lot about the problem and the potential pitfalls and all the things that are wrong. So sorry for the negative side. It really builds me up to talking about the positives, which is I'm going to give you 5 steps today on how you can start to nurture your candidates literally from this week. Like, none of these are rocket science, brain surgery types of things. So the first tip I want to give you is to start thinking long term. And this is super easy to say, of course, but what I mean is that typically recruitment processes, recruitment departments in companies, especially with maybe small or limited HR resources, they are going from job to job. So we are thinking, oh my God, we need to hire someone. And as soon as we hire that person, we stop thinking about it. And then the next time we have a recruitment process, we start thinking about it again. Yeah, it makes sense. But what we need to do now is, even when we are recruiting for a single position, we need to be thinking about what's happening after. So the first part of this tip, which is start as strongly as possible. Now, what I mean by that is that your candidate journey, your candidate nurturing the first experience is one of the most strong, most important ones. So basically, your job description, your job ad, how you explain the role, how they go through that first process of applying for the job for the first time, their first experience with your brand, this is one of the most vital ones, because if you get that wrong, nurturing that candidate later is going to be so much harder. So start as strong as possible. And what I mean by that is, like, pull out your big guns here. Like, so what I mean is, for TRAFFIT, one of the things that we love, or we really aim to do, is to give candidates as much information about the recruitment process from the very first day. So we say here that, these are the timelines. We're going to reply within 24 hours, and then you're going to have 2 days to prepare a task, etc. But the reason we put this in the job description is because we want to start strong. One of the values we have at TRAFFIT is transparency. So we're going to throw that out there at the very first moment we possibly can. We're not going to wait for the candidate to get to interview stage to start showing off some of the things that we try to do well. And I'm sure everyone on this webinar, your companies must have things that they are proud of. Try to get them out there first, whether or not it's great, let's say, initiatives around CSR. Maybe it's great initiatives around integration. Maybe you offer unlimited paid time off. Maybe you have great salaries. Put it out there early and start with some of your strongest things, so that when a candidate sees it, they already have this sense of, like, wow, I think this company is a company that I want to work for. So the first point is to start strong with some of your strongest assets. The second one sounds really simple, but it's really easy to just drop off this one, which is to keep solid notes. And this means that you don't have to use an ATS to do this one even. You can be using your Google Sheets, your Excel, wherever you store your candidates. Keep notes so you have a timeline, because if you want to nurture a candidate and invite them back to a role 12 months from now, you really need to know, you personally need to know what happened 12 months ago when we didn't hire that candidate. What's happened in that 12-month period? Are we in touch with that candidate? So keeping notes for you and other hiring managers is vital. And again, when you're hiring one role, it's really easy to think, like, that's not worth my time. I just need to hire. Let me just focus on candidates that are going through the process and succeeding. But it's really important that you keep notes on candidates that are not, because otherwise it's going to be much harder to nurture them later. And the third one, which is a little bit more specific possibly to ATSs, which is to start considering tagging candidates. Because notes are really great. Notes are when you dive into a candidate and say, oh, okay, let's have a look what happened with this candidate. Should we consider them for this role 1 year later? Tagging candidates also means that you have an ability to segment those candidates. So let's say, for example, TRAFFIT now has probably in excess of 400 rejected candidates in our talent pool. I don't want to have to go reading the notes one by one. The first thing I want to do is use our segmenting solutions like tagging to say, okay, show me the 10 candidates who were rejected because of language skills 1 year ago, because I think that in a year, there's a possibility that they develop that skill. And then I'm going to go and read the notes on those 10. So, because I know that one of the things that we're going to come back to a lot in this presentation is, I know that recruiters and hiring managers have real trouble with time. Yeah, we sometimes just don't have time to nurture all our candidates, give them all our feedback. But you can use tools. If you begin with a good structure, you can use those tags, those notes. They're going to pay you back for years to come in the future. So think about that kind of structure of tagging and segmenting candidates, so in the future you can get to the group that really matter to you the most. This is tip number 2, which is to invest into your rejections. And by the way, I know I'm talking super quick. It's only because I really value your time today. And I promise at the end of the webinar, I'll make the recording available and the slide deck. So don't worry too much if I'm going quick. I promise that you'll have a chance to watch this in slow motion and get over my horrible English accent. So 2, invest into your rejections. Again, it sounds so obvious, but sometimes we're like, hey, thank you for applying for our role. Unfortunately, we're not the strongest candidate in this recruitment process. Thank you so much. That's not feedback. That's not rejection process. So, but I'm super sympathetic to the time aspect of recruiters' jobs. So the first tip I'm going to give you in this section is use a ratio. What does a ratio mean? Think about the time the candidate has invested into your recruitment process, and that should be equal to the amount of time you're going to invest into the candidate's rejection feedback. And I mean this to be like pro recruiter, because if you have a candidate that applied for your job, you reached out to them twice and they ghosted you, they didn't reply, don't go and give that candidate a detailed reason as to why you rejected them. Like, hey, listen, thanks so much for applying for our job. I tried to contact you at this time and this day. I felt really sad that you didn't reply, so I tried again. No, we don't have to give those people detailed rejections, but we should still reject them, and we should still use our notes as to why and our tags as non-responder, for example. But let's think about the good candidates here, which is if a candidate went through your application form, phone verification call, completed a task and attended an interview, you should be considering and at least willing to invest the same amount of time into giving that candidate feedback on return. So this works like a pyramid, yeah? So the candidates that never really put a lot of effort into your application form, you don't have to put a lot of effort into their rejection. But those that did, you should be doubling down and really making them feel better. So that's one rule that I would recommend, which is think about how much time the candidate invested into your job, and that could be the time that you give back as a rejection time. Give details. Again, as I used in my really basic example before, which was, let's not tell a candidate that they were just not good enough this time, or they were just not the good candidate. Like, give them the feedback. And there's 2 really valuable reasons to do this. So one is, for example, I use an example here of a candidate that replied to my email, which basically said, like, thank you so much for the feedback. I really appreciate it. Thanks to this, I can improve, right? So one, we are building candidate experience. We are nurturing that candidate. Even at this moment, we are nurturing that candidate for something that might happen in a year or 2 years from now. I don't know how I'm going to need this candidate in the future. But the second thing as well, which is really key to candidate nurturing, is if a candidate was rejected today and we want to consider them a year from now for a future role when we hope they improved, your feedback is part of that improvement. So if I say to this candidate, hey, listen, I would have loved to hire you, but unfortunately, you just didn't have the right confidence in your language skills right now for this multinational role, they will take that back. They will think, okay, well, if I want to work for TRAFFIT in the future, I want to work with Mick in the future, I need to just spend some time learning the language more, feeling more confident. So it even increases the value of my talent pool because my talent pool is improving themselves based on my feedback. So it's a win-win to go into details and tell candidates specifics as to why you weren't able to hire them at the time, and don't relate it only to other candidates. Like, oh, other candidates were better, other candidates have more experience. Like, let's give them something that they can work on. They can't work on other candidates. So this is a really, really good one. And then finally, which is this is something that I've heard a number of companies doing, and I'm really impressed by this, which is be open to more. And what I mean by that is, when you've rejected a candidate and following the ratio, if you think that that candidate deserves like another 10 or 15 minutes of your time, give them that as an option. Yeah. So one prime example is say to a candidate in an email, like, hey, listen, if you have any questions for me, like, let me know. But also you can set up things like Calendly calls. So here's a prime example. That the great thing about Calendly is you can set it to like 15-minute limit. So you're not going to spend like 17 hours on calls with rejected candidates. But for example, if you had 5 candidates that got to the interview stage and you hired one, I think it's super fair to offer the 4. Like, hey, listen, you want to jump back on a call in the future at a date that works for you, where I can give you a little bit more context, because there's only so much I can say in an email, and I'm trying to be sensitive. So even offering calendar links at the bottom is a phenomenal way to make that person think, wow, I still want to work for that company in the future. 15 minutes now may save you thousands of dollars in the future in job advertisements or agency fees. Like, it's an ROI play. Tip number 3, which is create a feedback loop. Now, many people are talking now in the industry. There's some really nice ideas and statistics and suggestions about how do we know what a candidate's experience was like. Now, what I aim for was something not so fancy, really simple, but in my opinion, relatively effective, which is to ask a question of, would you agree to let me contact you in the future about other roles in my company? So this turned out by mistake to be a very powerful question, because if you can get someone at that most emotional moment when you've rejected them and said that, I'm sorry, you're not going to get the job that hopefully they wanted, and they reply to this email saying, yes, you can consider me for future roles, it actually means that you probably handled the recruitment process quite well. And the second thing is, again, a lot of the stuff I'm talking about today is candidate orientated. So if you're a candidate and someone's just said, hey, listen, I'm sorry, you're not going to get the job for whatever reason, but I would like to consider you in the future when things change. As a candidate, you see that there is a ray of hope, a light at the end of the tunnel, like, oh, I can't have been that bad, because Mick is actually saying that he wants to think about me in the future as well. But by asking this as a question and not a statement, by the way, so not saying I'll consider you in the future, but by asking, can I? One, we're getting permission, by the way, which we all know is very important in today's kind of like community. But second of all, you are going to get a direct feedback loop. So what we are looking for here are candidates that reply saying like, yes, you can. That's what we're looking for. And if a candidate says yes, it means that you're handling the rejection process as well as you possibly can. So here I used a few examples of a candidate that said like, yes, please, I'll be more than happy to talk again in the future. For me, as a rejecting hiring manager at the time, I took that as like, okay, great. I'm happy that candidate felt that way at the end of this certain part of our relationship. And there was a lot of other examples, and I pulled these examples all from one recruitment process of candidates saying, yes, thank you, I appreciate the feedback. You can, if you look for a salesperson in the future, let me know. And we come back to a nice statistic that we can actually start to implement at TRAFFIT and in other companies, which is effectiveness of our rejection process. It's a new KPI, just made it up. I hope it really works for some of you. But what we have here is that I rejected 29 qualified candidates from one recruitment process. 22 of them actually replied to that email saying, yes, Mick, please consider me for the future. Let's stay in touch. So we had a retained candidate percentage of 75%, 75.8% now. Why does this matter? Because in a minute, we're going to start talking about how do we nurture candidates. And obviously, as a company, you've got different options here. But what we would do at TRAFFIT is we would definitely be nurturing the candidates that came back and said, yes, keep talking to me. Of the 25% that didn't, it's very likely that I would follow up with an email later saying, hey, listen, I understand that you didn't reply to my last email. Can I still consider you again? Or can I add you to my candidate newsletter, for example? But definitely the 75%, they stay, they go in the communication process, and we keep working on them. So this is something to consider, making sure that we see when we reject a candidate, how many of them actually stay and want to learn more about the company. So now we get to point number 4. And I've got to be honest, point number 4 could be its own webinar, and probably if people think there's some value in it, I'd love to do it. But I'm going to cover it here now in a quite basic level, which is nurturing at scale. So again, we know that if we reject 19 candidates and hire one, we cannot keep one-to-one relationships with those 19 candidates, because every month is a new job. So we keep adding 19, 20, 30, it's just not possible. And I even pulled some statistics here that we looked at recently in TRAFFIT, which is that actually worldwide, it's predicted that HR headcounts and HR teams might even detract in the next 12 to 24 months. Yet, crazily, workloads are projected to be increased by 9.3%. So HR teams are not going to grow, but their workload and their responsibilities are going to be roughly 10% more. And that is things that we can attain down to things like trying to take care of remote work culture, recruiting internationally, taking care of employee branding. So we know all those things that are added to the HR workforce. But what is a silver lining here, which is a little bit of ray of sunshine for everyone, is that still the industry is actually expecting that HR spending technology will also increase by 9%. So what this is basically saying to us is your workload is going to increase 10%. We won't give you more people, but we will give you 10% more money to go spend on that new workload. And this is great for candidate nurturing because, again, we don't have time to keep in touch with every candidate one-to-one. Maybe if you are an agency of a high-end executive CEO roles, maybe it's worth it from an ROI perspective, but for entry positions, this is impossible. So what we need to do is look at the tools available to help us actually talk to a large number of people, whether or not it's 20, 50, 100, 200 at the same time. So you can go out and you can Google things like email marketing tools, marketing automation tools, and you're going to see that there are hundreds. Because why? Sales and marketing teams have been doing this with leads for years already. This industry is already built. What I would recommend you do, really simple, go ask your marketing team what they already use. It sounds, and probably some of you already did this already, which is great, but please just you don't have to reinvent the process here. So for example, at TRAFFIT, our marketing team was already using GetResponse email marketing for our newsletters to trials and former clients and clients. So we are going to use that tool to communicate automatically or at mass with our rejected candidates and our candidate talent pool. It makes sense. We didn't have to reinvent it. All our email templates are made for that as well. So what I would say is, if you don't know this already, please go and ask your sales and marketing team, what are they using for marketing automation and email marketing? It's very likely you'll be able to plug in your candidate nurturing to the very same tool. And then you can use tools to actually make your life easier and faster. So here is a prime example. So at TRAFFIT, what we have now, we have an integration through Zapier, which is integrated with TRAFFIT directly with GetResponse. So what that basically means is, when we've finished our relationship with a candidate and we have to reject that candidate, the moment the hiring manager clicks reject candidate, that candidate is instantly added to our GetResponse candidate list, our candidate newsletter list inside GetResponse. So no copy and pasting, no moving over. We just one click and it happens automatically. And what's even great is a lot of the information can also be added over. So rejection reason, the job they applied for, when they applied for it, who was the hiring manager, all these information can be moved from TRAFFIT to GetResponse. So even in GetResponse, if I've got 400 rejected candidates, but I've got a message that's going to be really interesting for only IT people. Let's say, for example, TRAFFIT employees qualify for a discount to attend InfoShare. I can also ask InfoShare if I can extend that to my rejected IT candidates. And if they say yes, I can email them as well. So segmenting is great, but what's really important here is you are not copying, pasting all of your candidates into other tools. There are solutions out there just to do that in a couple of clicks. Now, we have to send these candidates something. And this is probably where I lose the most amount of HR people when I'm telling them the story, because they're like, hey, listen, I'm not in marketing. It's not what I do. It's not my job. And what I would say is, please don't panic. Okay, it's not as scary and it's not as complex as you might think it is. The first thing to know is, remember, the marketing at mass, the mailing at mass, the newsletter industry is already phenomenally developed because it's developing for sales and marketing departments already. So out there on the internet, there are thousands of templates, newsletter creations, things to help you write content automatically. There is even tools that will write content for you using AI. But basically, you're not going out there and you're not having to design your own email templates. You're not having to do any kind of coding. The tool will help you do this. And in there, some of the things are just the most fundamental things you can do. First thing to know, consistency is the key. So when you do want to talk to 400 rejected candidates at the same time, one of the most important things to do is to commit to a cycle. So what I mean is, like at TRAFFIT, we will send a newsletter to our rejected candidates once a month. Once a month. That is our pattern. We will try not to break it and ever go more than once a month, but we definitely don't want to go less than once a month. We don't want to suddenly be like sending one email a month and suddenly once every 6 months, then we send 3 in 1 month, because we are trying to build a brand awareness and relationship with these rejected candidates. So consistency is key. They should know what they're getting and why they're getting it. So you don't have to commit to mailing them every week, because that's a lot of content. But you might consider saying, like, we're going to send a candidate newsletter once a quarter. That's okay. But remember that we want to build a relationship and think about how long it can take for a candidate to forget who you are. So at TRAFFIT, we aim to send a newsletter for candidates once a month. Repurpose the work you already do. And this is why I said, like, don't be scared of content, because probably most of you are already generating it, but just in a different method. So all those things that you're doing around employee branding, so things that you are sending internally to your existing team about, hey, here's the video or photos from the integration event that we just had, that was great. Oh, by the way, we just hit 2,000 customers, good job everybody. Or hey, these are our 3 new hires that we just made. There is no real reason why that information cannot also be shared with people who didn't get the job. Because what you're trying to do is make them excited to join your firm. So treating them like a future employee, treating them like, giving them confidence that you're talking to them like a future employee, is the key to making them a potential future employee. So think about the things you can share. Think about the things you're already writing. Think about the stuff that you see you're always already writing, probably on LinkedIn. All that stuff can be repurposed into email content, into blog post content, and you can share that with your candidates. You can also share things like, for example, like, over the next 12 months, we think we're going to be hiring in these roles. We don't know exactly when yet, but we're going to let you know. Like, let's get them excited. Let's get them like ready to click that, apply button when the time comes. And then the last point is to test different content types. Now, again, some of you will already know that and you'll already be aware of it, but again, it's something to consider. Not all your candidates will want to read long emails. Not all your rejected candidates will want to click and read a blog post. So feel free to mix it up, different types of content, like graphical content, infographics. Think about things like video format is great. So one of the things like I want to test at TRAFFIT is, let me introduce you to some of your potential future colleagues. And I want to actually grab my marketing team that are actually in the chat now, and they never heard this idea before, which is like, I want them to come and record like 3-minute video of like, what do you like about TRAFFIT and what you don't? What was your first month like inside TRAFFIT? Tell me about your role in TRAFFIT. And I want to package those into 2-3-minute videos and actually post them and send them to our rejected candidates. So they're like, oh, wow, I really would love to work with Adrian, with Tomek, with Anna, with Kasia. So remember to mix the content, because not everybody relates to email and long written content. So, and don't overthink it. Sometimes it's the shortest content that will get people most excited. So that is something that I would highly recommend, is to create a newsletter using a marketing automation tool, which really are mostly cost effective. You can set them up automatically and just send emails once a month, once every 2 months, and just put in there the real content that you're already creating for your existing team. And then my fifth and final tip, we are coming up to the wrap up in a minute for those who managed to stay this long, which is, think about when somebody re-enters a recruitment. And I use this as an example again, just like my lovely chocolate example before, which was a long time ago when I was like 18, 19, I used to go to the nightclub in the city centre in the UK. And I built a relationship with the guy who was head of security. And when I say I built a relationship for him, I used to buy him drinks when I got in the club. So what that meant is that every time I went to the club, I would skip the line, go straight to the front and go in. Yeah. Now, why am I talking to you about this? It's because 2 different reasons. One, we are nurturing a relationship with a candidate over a certain period of time, 6 months, 12 months, 2 years, whatever it may be. And if suddenly a role comes up for that candidate, that candidate is finally like experienced for and ticks all the boxes, the worst thing you can say to that candidate is, yeah, cool, go join the back of the line and I'll see you soon. All that hard work was lost because that candidate suddenly felt very unspecial. Yeah, they felt very impersonal. The same way that if someone says, oh, I applied for a job 12 months ago, I've been getting your newsletter and I think I want to apply for the job at marketing. Why would we send them to the career page when we already built a relationship with them? Now, the flip side of that, which is the potential losing of all that hard work, I can't tell you how cool I felt skipping the line at the nightclub. Your candidate will have some experience of that. When a candidate says, I'd love to apply for this job that you just posted, and I know that candidate for 12 months, and I'll be like, hey, listen, cool, let's skip straight back to the interview phase. There's no point you going through the application, sending your CV, filling the task in. We already approve you for that. And that candidate's going to have this huge sense of like, wow, like they remember me and they like me. And the thing is, again, you know this information. So if you can see that the last stage that candidate was at was interview process and then they were rejected and you have the reasons, Don't make them go through the whole maze again. Bring them back in and say, let's come back to the stage where we lost you last time. You will have great experience from your candidate, feeling special. They're going to be hyped, pumped. And then the really nice thing is, you're probably going to hire faster. So if you bring that candidate in an interview phase, they tick all the boxes that they didn't tick before, hired, your interview time is within that 10-day cycle now, and you can move your company faster and you can keep working on growth. So no need to start the process every time. Okay, that was a lot of information. So thank you for the ones that definitely, came to that. Let me recap those for a moment. So the first thing I want to remind you of is that initial thing of how the timeline looks now when we actually start doing candidate nurturing and we start going back to our talent pool, that having that gap where we don't nurture people at all actually can cause that candidate not to have any kind of brand awareness at the end and not really make candidate nurturing successful. I'm going to show you a super complicated diagram now of the alternative, which is what I believe is a candidate applies, they get rejected just like everyone has to go into the talent pool. We give them feedback, we give them an open door to new roles, and we send them a newsletter over that 18-month period. Then that candidate reapplies, they go straight to the interview stage, and they accept the offer because not only, hopefully, it's a very competitive offer, but you've been building the tension and building that brand and building that excitement for a period of time. So the process looks so much different than the previous one. And in the same time, from a business perspective, when you open the next job and you go to a list of validated candidates that you rejected in the past, you can hire from your talent pool and save money on job boards and job agencies and hire faster. So this is where I believe the two differences of journey from having to consistently spend money on gathering new candidates because you don't have a nurtured talent pool versus how you can actually save money and hire faster by going to candidates that you have. So to recap, start thinking long term. Right now, don't only think about filling that role you have, but think about how we can keep information, add notes, add tags to candidates for the future recruitment. Invest in your rejections. Remember, if somebody's putting a lot of time into your recruitment process to try and join your job, it's only right and fair that you invest into building the relationship even when you can't hire them at that point. Create the feedback loop. Ask questions that make candidates show you if you are actually like a valid recruiter for the future. So ask that question of, can I have your permission to consider you for future recruitments? It's really a great feedback loop for you. You can get some statistics out of it. You can get some feedback. Really important. Nurturing at scale. Go and talk to your marketing teams about the tools that they use to talk to people outside of one-to-one, 5-to-1, 10-to-1, 100-to-1, that kind of thing. So when we're talking to groups of candidates, ask your marketing team also, when they have 1,000 candidates, how do they break them down? So we might segment them by country, by language, by rejection reason, which might be really important. So go and learn that knowledge from your marketing team. If not, I promise that this is probably going to be my next webinar to dig into number 4 and give you some real life examples of what kind of content and how to communicate with candidates at scale. And 5, re-entering recruitments. So when you do build that relationship with a candidate, don't throw it away by saying to the candidate, join the back of the queue. Bring them in where they left, revalidate their information, see where they're up to, try to find out why they were rejected before and see if they've solved that problem when it comes to joining your company. And last but not least, I talked about your talent pool being your most valuable recruitment asset. And it's time for you to go and tell your CEO, your founder, if you are a founder, to just understand what's at stake here and how valuable your tool is. If you've got 200 rejected candidates over a period of 12 months, and we know that the average cost per candidate right now is $28, your talent pool is currently valued at $5,600. That's how you could sell that on the market. God, please don't. We don't sell data. We don't do it. But that is what your talent pool is worth. It's worth that amount of money. Now, on top of that, think about the money that you save per role. So if you've got that talent pool of 200 candidates and you hire 6 times a year, you're also adding another $3,000 on top of that, because that's what you would normally be spending on job boards and hiring agencies. So go do that calculation, show it to your CEO and tell them that's why you need to buy an automation tool. That's why you need this tool, that tool, because you need to take that value of $5,600 or whatever it may be, however many rejected candidates you have, and you need to nurture it so that you start to keep taking value out of that. Every time you hire someone from your talent pool, you are saving money. Every time you hire from your talent pool, you are saving time. This is a really, really important number. Whew, 41 minutes. Amazing. Thank you for everyone that joined. I just saw now Amelia asked a question, and we can definitely open it up for a few questions from the chat. I'll do my best to answer them as much as I can, which is, how about candidates contacted for different roles? I think, Amelia, this is completely up to you. So if you have a candidate, like, remember also this is down to permissions, and Anna is the expert at TRAFFIT here, but basically you can have a GDPR or permission to talk to candidates about future roles at the company. You don't have to define it to be the exact same role. So as long as you've got that permission, you can be talking to a content marketer about a potential role as a social media manager if you want. That connection is always open. But what I would say is that the key is to keep talking to them. So they will make that decision. So if you've got someone who hired for a content marketing role 12 months later, if they've got 12 newsletters from you, got an insight into TRAFFIT, if you did that right, there's a really good chance that that person will be like, hey, listen, I still feel like a content marketer, but I really want to join that company, so I'm going to take the role in social media. And we actually have this inside TRAFFIT, but it's done more organically. That I had a team member that applied for one of our customer service roles. We didn't find the connect, and we were in touch for like 9 months over that period. And then she actually joined in our sales department because she was like, hey, listen, I just feel like I want to get started in TRAFFIT. It seems like it's a fit for me. So I definitely think you can talk to people about variations within, like, that are close to their role. I think it's really a good idea. No problem. Oh, validation. I love it. It makes me feel better. I'm going to leave it open for a couple more questions, but for those, while we're waiting to see if anyone has any questions, I know I talk like a million miles an hour. After this meeting, I will definitely send you over a recording of the webinar. I'll also send you the pitch deck, the PPT, so you can look through some of those slides and some of the data I sent you. And also feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn, Mick Griffin at TRAFFIT, or any of the TRAFFIT team that you might already be connected to ask any questions, or ask, like, how do I apply this to my certain specific situation? Because there are variations of how to do this. There are variations of old data that we already have. And myself and the TRAFFIT team are super excited to talk about this any chance we get. So that was me waffling a little bit to see if there's any more questions. It seems like there isn't. So at this time, I'd like to say thank you so much for your attention. I really appreciate it. I promise I'm going to follow up with this webinar and talk a little bit more in a different webinar about the content strategy around talking to existing candidates. Thank you so much, and have a great Monday, and see you all soon, I hope. Thanks so much.